Hey guys, Sam McLean here, composer from Melbourne, Australia. Today I want to talk about MIDI versus music. Now when I say MIDI, I mean sequencing MIDI in a computer, obviously, to compose, and as opposed to composing with musical notation. So most of us, when we compose, will either use MIDI sequences or notation to convey our ideas, and a question must be asked: which is more effective? So is traditional notation here to stay, or will MIDI programming become a new standard of notation? Now I believe the answer is essentially both. So MIDI notation, musical notation, has been around for centuries, and in terms of being a performing musician is by far the most effective way to read music. But is it the most effective way to write music? Now I don't believe it is, and I've come to this realization through being a performer and composer and seeing music through two different languages, and that's the language of notation and the language of MIDI. So most people tend to just sort of choose a side and stick with it. They may dismiss MIDI in favour of notation, or vice versa. And now this is where I think the problem begins. It's not a matter of choosing sides. There are no sides in music. Music is a universal language. It transcends borders, cultures and beliefs. So why should music be thought of as something that must follow a rigid and, in my opinion, erroneous way of thinking? So I pay homage to all of my favourite composers and respect and admire them for adding such a wealth of knowledge to humanity. And now the argument of MIDI versus music, this is no way meant to be revolutionary or radical. I'm not trying to destroy the foundation that my heroes have laid. In fact, I'm attempting the opposite, to add to our wealth of musical expression. So, notation is vital in honing skills as a performer and understanding music theory. Now, that is undeniable. But something I deny is that music must be written as it has been for centuries if a composer is to be taken seriously and to make music that can stand the test of time. So I personally have a solid understanding of music theory. I study music composition at the Melbourne Conservatorium of Music. You know, it's one of the finest music institutions in Australia. So, you know, it's at a very advanced level of composing, and you know, so I think that in terms of being creative, MIDI sequences are actually a far more effective way to write than just writing straight into notation, you know, okay? So with a MIDI sequence, there's no consequence for writing something that sounds bad, because you know instantly if it sounds bad. You know, you don't have to rock up to the first rehearsal with an orchestra and go, oh no, that whole passage sounds terrible, what was I thinking? And then you're sitting there embarrassed because you've got an orchestra there thinking that you're crap, you know. So basically with MIDI you can listen back straight away and know if it sounds bad. And why is this? Because MIDI gives us an ability to listen back without being a slave to an instrument, for example. So imagine Chopin. If Chopin couldn't play piano, could he have written the music he did? And I'm thinking probably not. Like, being proficient in piano has always been a way of composers of the past to work their ideas into compositions they know sound good. But this was before the advent of MIDI. When MIDI was invented in the 1980s, it was a revolutionary way to make music that many creative people embraced. So many people who had good artistic taste and knowledge, combined with the fundamentals of music, were able to hear their compositions performed in real time. Okay, the computer took away the tyranny of the piano and let us think subjectively. It freed us from the technical constraints of having to be able to play our compositions to know if they worked or not. With MIDI, we're able to use our ears to know if something sounds good. So we can subjectively listen by using our ears without having to be a slave to an instrument, and like it frees up cognitive load. Okay, our brain is essentially a computer. Why give it tasks if it doesn't need to perform, and so it can perform at maximum operating efficiency? So to write music effectively, first one must have knowledge of music, and although it may just be fun to jump into your favourite DAW and start composing in the MIDI domain, if you don't have a solid musical foundation, it's sort of like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Like you may get lucky once, but it's going to be probably pretty unlikely you're going to be able to keep creating at an advanced level. All right. So when I write MIDI sequences, personally, like I use all of the skills I've learnt studying music theory, and I've learnt these skills through musical notation. So MIDI and notation is a symbiotic relationship where one's not stronger or better than the other. Rather, each element combines, making new ideas possible. Okay, we'll make a super music. Okay, so let's think about this for a second. So when you hear a melody in your head, you're in your favourite park, or you're walking down the street, or I don't know, you're kicking the ball, or you're at work or doing something, and you hear this cool melody. How do you get that melody out of your head onto paper, so to speak, and make sure that the performer will play it without bias and play it in the exact same fashion that you've written it? And the answer is through oral training, okay? And that is melodic and rhythmic dictations, completing hours of exercises that sharpen your musical skills. And how do you know how to create compelling chord progressions, or how can you incorporate devices like counterpoint into your music? Through more musical training and notation. Sorry, me little orchid, I keep banging him there. So that may be the case, oral training and musical training. But how do you get your own personal orchestra to play your compositions any time of day or night? How do you listen subjectively without using mental energy on performance? And the answer is MIDI. Okay, so now this video shouldn't make you want to sort of do one or the other. It's not a competition. It's music. All right. So trust your training, but more importantly, trust your ears. So I come from a sound engineering background. I've got a degree in sound engineering, and these are your most important tool. We're always listening subjectively. If we weren't doing that, we're not doing our job. So it's music. It's sound, after all. Music is sound, and sound engineering is subjective listening, so we got to do the same in music. Now, to digress a little bit, we had a guest speaker at the Melbourne Conservatorium a few weeks back. He's a composer from overseas. I won't say his name out of respect to him, but basically he came in and told us that half of his compositions were just intuitive. He couldn't really explain how he did it. Like, he gave us a bit of an idea, but it was a bit sort of, oh geez, I just sort of jump on the piano and stab away at a few notes until I find something I like. And now to think you can blindly just pick notes and put them together to make a composition that has substance and meaning, in my mind, that's folly. Okay, like the very word compose means to put together. So the inability to describe how a process works demonstrates a lack of musical understanding and a certain ignorance, I think. And music, like any art form, it builds from the foundations that others have laid for us. And to scoff at these foundations would be actually to scoff at music itself. So this is why I felt compelled to make this video and originally write the blog post. I'm basically talking through one of my blog posts here. You can check it out on my website, but I'm trying to build upon the musical knowledge that is already available, and with the aid of MIDI, I believe this is possible. Righto. So an analogy we can think of in this whole argument of MIDI versus music is thinking of a bear, okay? A bear. So in Australia, the closest thing we have to a bear is a koala bear. It eats roots and leaves. So, you know, we don't have grizzlies or brown bears, black bears, whatever, like you guys might have in your countries. But just let's imagine a bear for a second. So in cities that are close to these bear populations, the residents may find a bear rummaging through the trash, and like, while it might be dangerous to take your bins out, well, there's a bear out there. Researchers have actually found that they do this because it's actually easier than hunting. So the researchers then went on to theorise that this runs true in most living organisms, that they'll find a path of least resistance, a system of survival that expels the least amount of mental energy. So now, why can't this same concept be true of MIDI? Like, surely MIDI and music, like, so the whole MIDI versus music argument. So MIDI sequences expel less mental energy than thinking in terms of notation, right? And this isn't a matter of being lazy or unwilling to perform. This is a matter of maximising your mental efficiency. So at the very least, MIDI sequences require far less mental exertion than having to play your latest piano concerto yourself. You know, it's as simple as that. So I believe that basically in the future, MIDI will be an accepted norm, and notation will be just simply a means for musical study and a way for performers to communicate our ideas. So, and you know, the future may be closer than you think. If you think of AAA games, Hollywood, the recording industry, MIDI is lauded. It's held in a very high regard, and it's utilised as an incredible creative tool. And now I think that this is what needs to happen, that the general musical public needs to accept MIDI as a musical tool, not as some sort of niche way of creating music, okay? So, to summarise, notation is a vital tool for music theory and performance, while MIDI is indispensable for workflow and subjective listening. The two are closely related and shouldn't be thought of in isolation. So, like, that both of these, music and musical notation and MIDI sequences, they should be skills that composers know are fundamental to the way that music is written. By lowering the cognitive load of having to perform, composers are freer than they've ever been, and that freedom translates into musical development and new discoveries. It makes it possible to build upon a foundation that was so lovingly paved by our musical icons. So don't choose one, choose both, okay? Always stay creative, keep creating, but if you know that you don't understand MIDI as well as you'd like to, then just simply jump on your computer and start having a go. And vice versa, if you're a MIDI master but you don't really know that much about musical theory and notation, then of course you need to get those skills up to scratch. And then once you have the two and bring them together, then you'll be like a super composer, if you were. You'll be able to have these really fantastic ideas that you can really like just drive home and work hard at, and that's the thing. It's hard work. It's not easy. So it's like what Shia LaBeouf said. It's like, some people dream of success, but you're going to wake up tomorrow and work hard at it. I'm sure we've all seen that motivational video. I love it. It's like a mantra to me. So, yeah, work hard at it, stay creative, and have a crack. All right, guys, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Ciao.